I want to come to you out of Mark chapter 5 today. We're going to read verses 21 to the end of the chapter. That's verse 43. And it's an interesting story about Jesus' encounter with two very different but very desperate people. This series is about Jesus and people where we're just looking at encounters that Jesus has with different people. We've looked at Thomas. We've looked last video, we looked at a demon-possessed man. Just different people that Jesus encounters along the way. There's not many stories more entertaining than this one, and I want to read this through to you, and I'll just make comments along the way to help you better understand the story, and then hopefully we'll have an application or two as well. So beginning in verse 21, Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Jesus had been in Gentile territory in the area of the Gerasenes, east of the Sea of Galilee. He now gets in his boat and goes back to the west side where he does a lot of his ministry. And when he gets off on that southwest corner or west side, as soon as he gets off the boat, people are immediately there. Notice he doesn't get out and go into a village. They're just all right there on the shore. And it says when he got there, he was on the shore. They were right there. It says, then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. So Jairus, once again, we're talking about encounters with Jesus. Jairus initiates this encounter with Jesus. He comes out to the shore. He doesn't stay in the village and Jesus comes to him. He leaves the village, goes out to the shore to meet Jesus. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. My little daughter is dying, he said. Please come and lay your hands on her, heal her so that she can live. Now I want to point out a couple things from the text and then I want to paint a picture. First of all, if you'll notice, it says he fell at Jesus' feet. If you'll remember, if you've watched the other video on Jesus from the early part of Mark chapter 5 with the demon-possessed man came and fell at Jesus' feet. Same exact move indicating, Jesus, you have authority and I'm submitting myself to you. It was one thing for the demons to do. It's another thing for a synagogue ruler to do that. And we'll talk about that here in just a moment. Second thing I want you to notice is he was begging him. This is such a huge word in Mark chapter 5 because 3 times in 1 through 20, demons begged Jesus to do something. Some townspeople begged Jesus to do something. The demon-possessed man begged Jesus to do something. And now here, Jairus, the synagogue ruler, is begging Jesus to do something. And that word is a word of desperation. You beg when you're absolutely desperate. That's kind of the tone behind this word. And I just want you to think about what's going on in Jairus' world. He's the synagogue ruler. I would compare that to the mayor of a small town. Everything in a village in Israel 2,000 years ago was wrapped around the synagogue. Your political life, your economic life, your social life, your religious life, it was all tied around the synagogue. Being a synagogue ruler means that he was over the synagogue. And being over the synagogue, he was over those people in this village. Now, think about it. If it's a village of 500 or 1,000 people, and he's running the synagogue, do you think there's anybody in town that doesn't know who he is? Absolutely not. So when he comes out to see Jesus, everybody in that crowd knows exactly who he is. Being the synagogue ruler, his friends who he runs with are going to be who? Other synagogue rulers, Pharisees, Sadducees, the Sanhedrin. He is a part of the religious establishment of the day. What do we know about the religious establishment of the day and their relationship with Jesus? At this point, at best, it is strained. They don't like his teaching. They're scared of his miracles. They're certainly scared of demon possession and the fact that he is casting out demons. They have called him names. In fact, back in chapter 3 of Mark, they have already accused Jesus of having a demon and casting out demons in Satan's name. They don't trust Jesus, they don't like Jesus, and they want Jesus to be gone. But here's this little town a long way from Jerusalem where all the political activity goes on, in this little bitty village. Here's Jairus, and although he runs with that crowd, either, and we don't know for sure, either he's heard the stories about the healing or he's actually seen some of the healings himself. He believes, he has enough faith to believe, and notice very specifically what he says, that if Jesus comes and places his hand on his daughter will be healed, and she's dying, and she's got to have the touch of Jesus or this little girl's going to die. So let's just think about how desperate Jairus must be. Because what does he put on the line here? He puts his reputation on the line. He puts his finances on the line. He puts his job title on the line. He puts his position in the community on the line. If things don't work out and he gets reported as being a follower of Jesus, they could come in, they could remove him from office, they could fire him from his job, he could be excommunicated from the temple. All sorts of things could happen to him. All of them being really, really negative for his family. But you know what? Out of all that stuff, the money and the power and the prestige and the friends and all of that, you know what was more important to Jairus? His little girl. His little girl. She was 12 years old. This is his baby girl, and he can't imagine her dying. And so imagine the desperation, and imagine what he's willing to do to have his little girl saved. He's willing to get on his knees in front of a crowd of people, all of who know him and respect him as the spiritual leader of their village, gets on his knees before Jesus and beg Jesus, if you'll just come lay your hands on my daughter, she'll be healed. Wow, there's a lot there. There is a lot there. This is a desperate man putting everything on the line. So we continue reading. Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. So they're now going to walk through the village, going to Jairus' house to heal his daughter. As he's going, the people are around him everywhere, and they're bumping into him, and it's a big crowd. I don't know if big means 50 or 500. I don't know what big means, but there's a big crowd. There's a lot of people around him, and they were bumping into him. My guess is it's going to be closer to 200 than it is to 50, but I don't know that for sure. There was a woman in the crowd who had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years she had spent everything she had to pay them, but had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. There's a lot here I want you to think about. Okay, number one, what does the law of Moses say about a woman in her period or bleeding? And that is she's ceremonially unclean. So during the time of her period, what she's supposed to do, quarantine, stay alone, be apart from the community. She can't go to the synagogue. And then once the period is over, she's reinstated. Well, this girl's been that way for 12 years. 12 years. So I want you to imagine, for 12 years, she hasn't been able to go to the synagogue. Well, what's the synagogue the center of? Everything. So for 12 years, probably had to live outside the walls of the city with the other people that were declared unclean, who were people like tax collectors, sinners is what they were called, prostitutes. I would include in that people with leprosy. Those kinds of people, those are the people living outside the city walls. They were the nobodies. They were the outcasts. Probably for 12 years she hasn't been touched. If she's married, I'm not saying she is, but if she's married, she hasn't had relations with her husband. She hasn't been able to touch her other children, nothing. If she's single, she hasn't been able to date or get married or have children. And think about the identity of a woman in that culture was so wrapped up around her ability to get married and have children. She had none of that. Completely alone. There is a reasonable probability that this woman has not been touched in 12 years by another human being. Can you imagine the loneliness? Can you imagine the isolation? Can you imagine the desperation? In her own way, as desperate as Jairus was. Now, I want you to notice here, she had suffered a great deal. She had gone to many doctors, and over the years had spent everything she had to pay them. So she had some money, which makes me wonder, and I don't know this, but makes me wonder, either her parents are still alive and her parents have money, or I wonder if she's married and her husband has a job and is paying for this, but finally all the money is gone. Don't know, but whatever money she had, it's all gone now. And every time she'd gone to a doctor, every time she had done anything, she'd gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. Now, I just want you to stop there and think about how many excuses she could have come up with for that day. Because it says here, she had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. So this woman has so many reasons, excuses, for not being there that day. I've been bleeding for 12 years. I've been to many doctors. Nothing's ever worked. It's just gotten worse. There's a big crowd around. If I get caught, I'm going to be in trouble. All of that kind of stuff. But she overcomes all of those excuses, every one of those excuses. For what reason? Because she had faith too. Just like Jairus had faith, if Jesus gets to my daughter and touches her, she'll be healed. This woman has the faith that says, I don't even believe he has to touch me. If I could just sneak through and touch him, I could be healed. And so her belief is a little bit different. Once again, living among the leprous and the sick and those kind of people, she may have seen more miracles from Jesus than Jairus had, because that's who Jesus had healed, was her friends. What did she put on the line? Jairus put his whole livelihood on the line. She literally put her life on the line. If she's unclean and she is not allowed in the village, and she walks into the village and she's in a crowd touching people, I guess in today's terminology, we'd call her a super spreader, right? She's around touching people, which is highly illegal. That if somebody wanted to press it and press charges against her, she could have been maybe cast out of society for the rest of her life, or maybe even stoned. She's literally putting her life on the line, but she's so desperate that she says, you know what? Anything is better than the last 12 years. I can't do this anymore. So here's what I'm going to do. Big crowd. I'm just going to kind of sneak through the crowd. Last thing I want to do is be noticed. I'm just going to touch the hem of his garment. I'm going to be healed because I know that's the kind of power he has. Then I'm going to sneak back out. No one will know the difference, and I get my life back. Desperate woman. And so what happens? Verse 29, immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. So she was right. She was right. All she had to do, she just snuck through and touched the hem of his garment. She was healed immediately. Now, what happens next is very interesting. It says Jesus realized at once that the healing power had gone out from him. So he turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my robe? Now, don't mistake for a minute that Jesus was clueless as to what was going on, and the power just sucked out, and he went, well, I didn't expect that. Jesus knew this encounter was coming. I do not believe this took him by surprise. He stops in the middle of a crowd, I want you to think about this, that is full of people, where he's being bumped and jostled with everyone, and he just stops. And think about it, when he stops, everybody's going to stop with him, and I can just imagine in my head, and I don't know this, but I can imagine in his head him just going, hey, would everybody just back up a little bit? Just back up a little bit. Give me a little space here. Who touched me? Who touched me? And notice what his disciples said in verse 31. Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask who touched me? His followers were like, Jesus, you asked some really weird questions, but none is weirder than this one. What do you mean, who touched me? 100 people just touched you. 200 people touched you. You're being tossed back and forth. And Jesus is like, no. Listen, everybody here, listen. Somebody touched me. I'm not talking about bumped into me. I'm talking about an intentional touch. Who did this? And then if you'll notice here, verse 32, He kept on looking around to see who had done it. Kept on looking tells me there was a time where everyone is silent, they're standing there, a period of time. Is that 10 seconds? Is that a minute? Is that 2 minutes? Where he just says, who touched me? He stops and waits. Anybody going to tell me? Somebody going to step forward? Nobody does. They're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting. And imagine this woman. Life's on the line, maybe? The last thing she wanted was to be noticed. The last thing she wants is to be brought out of the crowd. And now everybody is waiting, and she knows she's got to step forward. So look what happens. Then the frightened woman, scared to death, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. The new International Version says, told him the whole truth. Now, don't miss this. Once again, what? She fell to her knees. What did Jairus do? He fell to his knees. At the beginning of Mark chapter 5, what did the demon-possessed man do? Fell at his knees. And what is it? Falling in the authority of Jesus. She was trembling, scared. Why? My guess is, at least she thinks she's going to be reprimanded by Jesus, embarrassed, harassed, made fun of. Don't you know that she's scared to death that he's going to say, you're in here illegally, you're going before the tribunal, we're going to press charges, you're in trouble. Scared to death for her life, scared to death because she's going to be humiliated again as she has been so many times over the last 12 years. Absolute humiliation. And so she falls to her knees and she tells him the whole truth. In other words, she doesn't make excuses. She doesn't try to lie her way out of it. She just falls at his knees and says, here's what happened. I think she's expecting Jesus to reprimand her, humiliate her, embarrass her, harass her. I think that's what she's expecting. And look what Jesus does. And he says to her, daughter. Now, don't miss the irony here. Jairus came to Jesus because he wanted to save his daughter. Jesus, I don't know that there's a more intimate word you could call a female in that culture than daughter. I'm your father. I love you. You're my little girl. I cherish you. What a term of endearment. What a term of protection. It's a term of family. It's a term of unconditional love. So instead of reprimanding her, he calls her daughter. And then look what he says. Your faith has made you well. You're well because of your faith. Go in peace. Your suffering is over. Go in peace. He's like, listen to me, daughter. Listen to me. You're well because of your faith in me, and bless you for your faith. Because of your faith, because of your healing, your suffering's over. You're now going to have a life of peace. If you're married, you get to go back and be reunited with your family. If you're single, you get to go back and begin life anew and maybe get a husband and have children in the future. You're healed. You get to go back to the synagogue. You get to go back into the village and move in and have a job, and you get to be a part of the social community. You get to touch. You get to laugh. You get to be with people again. Your misery is over. Go in peace. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that beautiful? And he is just so tenderly loving this sweet woman who was an absolute outcast, the complete opposite of Jairus. Jairus is the ultimate insider. She's the ultimate outsider. He rules the synagogue. She's not allowed in the synagogue. And now she is set free. She is healed to be back a part of the life of that village again. But while he was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. They told him, your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. I just want to stop and just emotionally feel Jairus here for a moment. First of all, he's an insider. He's important. Has a lot of money. He has a lot of power. This woman is an outcast. She has nothing. She means nothing to that culture. And I want you to think about it. If he had been synagogue leader 12 years prior, he might be the very guy that declared her unclean and kicked her out of the synagogue in the village. He would have been. If he had been synagogue ruler 12 years earlier, that certainly would have happened. Wouldn't that be ironic? Can you imagine, first of all, the pain of just knowing my daughter's died, I had hope, my hope is gone. Second, to think, and it's all because of this woman who's an outcast, who means nothing, who has nothing. If he kicked her out, he might remember, this is the same woman, and now look what's happened. Imagine the pain, imagine the fear, imagine the sadness, imagine the anger surrounding Jairus as he's going, not only did I lose my daughter, but I lost it because of this woman interrupting Jesus when he was on to my house. I can't believe this could happen to me. I think I would feel all that. And yet look what Jesus does. What a great leader Jesus was, by the way. Look at this. But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just have faith. Here's what I can imagine. I don't know that this happened, but here's what I imagine. I can imagine Jesus grabbing Jairus' face, getting 6 inches from his face and saying, Jairus, listen to me. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to the naysayers. This isn't over. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to not have fear. I just need you to believe. Remember the faith that brought you to me in the first place? Just hold on to that faith. Just hold on to it. Just stay right there. Just hold on to it. And we're good. This isn't over. Just follow me. And so Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. So the whole crowd, he says, it's over. I need you guys to go away. Other 9, there's 12 apostles, other 9, take care of these people, teach them, talk to them, minister to them. Peter, James, and John, you 3 come with me. It's going to be the 4 of us and Jairus. We're going to go to the house. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion and weeping and wailing. He went inside and said, why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep. But the crowd laughed at him. So they show up to the house and they're already starting to mourn the death of this little girl. And he says, this commotion is for nothing. She's not dead, she's just asleep. No, she's cold, she's clammy, she doesn't have a heartbeat, she's dead. Jesus is like, you know what? I'm going to handle this. Everybody leave. She's not dead, she's just asleep. We'll be out in a minute. And so verse 40, he made them all leave and took the girl's father and mother and the 3 disciples into the room where she was lying. So he sent the crowd away. They laughed at him, mocked him, because they knew she was dead. They're mocking him for saying such a ridiculous statement. And so he says, okay, I'm only allowing 6 people in this room. 6 people. There's my 3 followers, Peter, James, and John. There's me, and there's mom and dad. 6 people come in with the dead body of this little girl. Holding her hand, he said to her, little girl, get up. And the girl, who was 12 years old, I just have to stop right there. How long had that woman been bleeding? 12 years. How old is this little girl? 12 years. The irony is, should not be missed there either. Immediately stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone that this had happened and told them to give her something to eat. The strict orders not to tell anyone, too early in his ministry. There's going to be a resurrection come up in a couple of years, the resurrection of Lazarus that he's going to do in public, and everyone's going to know, and it's going to cost him his life. He's still early in his ministry. He's got a lot more to do before he's ready to die on a cross. And so he's like, Jairus, listen to me. Your daughter's alive. She's healthy. You guys, you got to keep it under wraps. You got to keep your mouth shut because I've got other things I have to do. And so he strictly ordered them to be quiet and then give them something to eat. What an amazing story. An amazing story about faith, about the power of Jesus. about desperation. And so I just want to close out here with just a couple of minutes of just talking to you about some applications from this story, because there's actually a lot of application here. Okay? So, number one is this. I think desperation is the great equalizer. You know what brings all people to Christ? Desperation. A realization that I'm lost in my sin and that I have no hope and Jesus is my only answer. And you know what's interesting about desperation? It takes away all of our differences. Rich and poor, black and white, different countries, different backgrounds. All of that melts away when you're desperate and you need Jesus and He's your only hope. It's the great equalizer. It makes us all equal. There's an old preacher saying, the ground is level at the foot of the cross. We're all equally available and have access to the blood of Jesus Christ. But what drives us there? Our own desperation. So many things divide us. But let me tell you something. The blood of Jesus, it completely washes the things that divide us away and brings us together at the foot of the cross. That's one thing I think is really, really important. Number two, I would just say, look at that woman and all the excuses she could have made for not coming to Jesus or not having faith in Jesus. You know what? There's a million excuses for us too. But don't let the excuses keep you from doing what you need to do and bowing at the feet of Jesus. Don't just stop with the excuses, because here's reality, and here's the big takeaway I want you to get, and that is this. Jesus' power is available to anyone, but it's only accessible to those who step out of the crowd. Okay? Why was Jairus able to have his daughter saved that day? Because the power was available, but what did he have to do? He had to step out of the crowd. He had to walk out and humble himself in front of all those people. Same way with a woman. You have to step out of the crowd and have the guts, the faith, the fortitude to step forth. And sometimes when you step forth, in the back of our mind, well, if I step out in faith, what if God doesn't show up? What if I look like a fool? What if people make fun of me? What if it doesn't work? That's what keeps us back from the incredible power of God. And this story is a story that says, you know what? His power is available to you. But you got to do something first. You know what you have to do? You have to step out of the crowd. Quit making excuses and step out of the crowd and see what God can do for you. Which leads me, I think, to the last one, and that is this. Our best ministry opportunities are often found in the middle of chaos, in the middle of the interruptions. That woman was an interruption. He was on his way to heal Jairus' daughter. She interrupted him. It was an amazing ministry moment. That great ministry was all about an interruption. Let me tell you what God doesn't do to you. He doesn't consult you and say, I noticed that Saturday from 2 to 4 you're not busy. I'm going to send some ministry opportunities your way. He sends you ministry opportunities all the time, but you know when they're going to be? When you're busy, when you're too busy, when you don't have time, when it's a huge interruption to what you have planned. And Jesus puts it in your life and says, now as a Christian, you're my hands and feet. You're the ministry of Jesus in this world. Are you going to listen? Are you going to stop? And so really where I want to challenge you at the end of this message is start putting up your antennas and asking Jesus every day, I'm your hands and feet. Open up my eyes. Take the shackles off my eyes. Open up my eyes to see where you're working and where you want me to work. And what you'll find is, not every day, but all the time, He's putting people in front of you for you to minister to. And then what you have to do is you have to stop and go, whoa, you know what? I know I'm busy, but He just laid somebody right at my feet that I'm supposed to minister to. And then we have to, as His followers, as His ministers, we have to take the interruption and lead people to the feet of Jesus. And so just know, I really want you to work on that, just knowing that is your calling in life. Your job is not your calling. Your family is not your calling. It's a big part of what you do, but your calling is what? Minister of Jesus Christ, ministering in the midst of interruptions. By the way, some of the biggest interruptions is ministering to your kids. If you have children, They're going to ask you the best parenting questions, the times that are going to make the biggest difference if you answer at your most inappropriate, inconvenient times. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You have to put other things on the back burner. You have to take care of those things. Best ministry comes in the interruptions. Father, thank you for our time together in this video. I pray for everyone watching here, Lord, that we will really take these matters to heart. I pray that you will use us in powerful ways to minister to other people. And Lord, for those of us watching today who need to come to Christ, Lord, I pray we would put away the excuses that we've made, and that we'll step out of the crowd and watch you change us, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, thanks for watching today. I encourage you to go to my website, embarkmen.com. There's other videos there. If you want to participate in this ministry financially so it can continue to build and grow stronger, I would invite you to donate on the website as well. Thank you. God bless you. Have a great day.